Howdy, folks. Welcome to another edition of Broken Brains with your host, Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation, where we look at the issues of repetitive brain trauma in the forms of repetitive impacts from contact sports and repetitive blast exposure from our combat veterans, and what these conditions are doing to the brains of our athletes, kids, and our soldiers, and the corresponding epidemic of mental illness that goes untouched in this country and untrained, resulting in large amounts of mistreatment, misdiagnosis, and is arguably the largest preventable cause of mental illness that we have right now in this country. So we reach out to researchers and athletes and doctors and all kinds of folks from this walk of life in order to inform you on the issues of repetitive brain trauma and why you must protect yourself and others, because this is not taught. And we're just becoming aware of this in the military as well as in the civilian societies. So let's move on. Today, we've got another great guest. It's Brigadier General Kathleen Flarity, who has a whole bunch of DNP, PhD, but I understand USAF, United States Air Force, after her name. And she's the executive director of the Marcus Institute for Brain Health and the co-founder and deputy director of the CU Center for Combat Research, the director of Combat Research Scholar, and fellow program and associate professor of emergency medicine. She is an experienced researcher, nurse practitioner, and emergency and critical flight care nurse with over 41 years of military service, from Army combat medic all the way up to Air Force general. Her service includes multiple deployments and commands, most recently serving as the mobilization assistant to the command surgeon, Air Mobility Command at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois. She's published 16 book chapters and no less than 38 journal articles, including 20 peer-reviewed research manuscripts, and has delivered hundreds of national, internationally invited lectures or keynote addresses. We're going to have to talk about our summit coming up in September. Dr. Flarity's passion for treatment and research interest in PTSD, TBI, and resiliency for our nation's heroes. She's provided her resiliency intervention grounded in positive psychology, neuroscience, cognitive psychology, and human performance science to over 30,000 military and civilian heroes. General, welcome to the show, and thank you for the time that you're taking to be here, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I'm honored to be here.
No, man. Honor's all ours, man. We love brain people here, man. We got so much to talk about. So how did you get in? So tell us about the current position that you're in right now. What is the Marcus Institute?
So the CU Anschutz Marcus Institute for Brain Health, it's here on the CU Medical Campus in Aurora, Denver, was founded in 2017 by Dr. Jim Kelly. It was money donated by, I should tell you, I also had my own TBI, so you'll see as we go the word flow, right? So from the Home Depot department, Bernie Marcus donated money to provide this incredible service to our veterans and first responders. So it started in 2017. I took it over about 15 months ago, based on my success of co-founding and running the CU Center for Combat Research. We do military medical research, so we fill the gaps where the DoD can't fill those gaps. And unlike taking decades to get the science out there and the clinical practice changes, we get those in 3 years, which is unheard of when you do research. So last February, the chancellor asked me, based on my leadership and success, if I'd take over the Marcus Institute for Brain Health.
Wow. And so what do you focus on? So when you talk about brain health, is it a service provided entity, or is it research, or is it both?
It's both. It's both. So we provide assessment and treatment for veterans, first responders, and I recently started which I think you'd be really interested in, a 2-week program that goes from assessment to treatment called Brain Assessment and Treatment for Lifelong Excellence, and started just with the 7th Ranger Regiment looking at mortarmen because, all the things that the repetitive blast injury, the repetitive blast exposures can set them up for a lot of negative effects. And so I believe, like you, that I think we need to prevent and mitigate. But back to the Marcus Institute for Brain Health. So we, at no out-of-pocket cost to the individuals, we fly them out to this campus and we house them. We have colonels housing, old colonels officer housing that we converted into a home that they live on. And we provide evaluation. So we have this amazing co-located integrated team of PhDs and doctors and therapists that help evaluate the patients, to evaluate, is it PTS? Is it a traumatic brain injury? Is it vestibular? Is it ocular motor? Is it cognitive? What pieces? Where's their areas of growth? And then we also have a 3-week intensive outpatient program where they live with us, and they can get 32 hours of treatment of this amazing integrated co-located team. And they just walk across the hall. This building that I'm in is a 77-year-old old Army, Air Force Army barracks here on campus, because the center of this campus was the old Fitzsimmons. And we saw the most amount of patients coming out of Pearl Harbor. So they all came here. So it was the busiest hospital in the world at that time. So we have a lot of military history and legacy here. So this amazing treatment, I've had Vietnam vets who said, just in the evaluation, the assessment process, I got in 3 days what I didn't get in 30 years. And so with the integrative team as well, it's amazing, the hope. And because, as you know, for too long, traumatic brain injury has been misunderstood and poorly treated. And TBI is often misdiagnosed as a mental health condition such as PTSD. And if it's misdiagnosed, right, then you're never going to address the underlying injury. So many people, and a lot of times you don't have that one big TBI, right? You didn't have that one IED explosion. You didn't have that one car crash. And for too long, researchers, academia, DOD hasn't understood the magnitude of that low-level cumulative blast injuries just in training and in combat operations, but in training. So we address that too. So you don't have to have that one big TBI to come here. Our amazing intake team looks at the history and says, what's your MOS? What's your Air Force specialty code?
Very
You're
good.
exposed to these things. What are your symptoms? And then we have validated tests before they come here that will help us guide us that, maybe it's this behavioral health. It's this psychological health issue. But as you very well know, Bruce, that the TBI alone can cause anxiety and depression and is an independent risk factor for suicide. So amazing team here. We also have a multitude of research that we're doing, and we're collaborating with industry, academia, and our military partners. Through the Center for Combat Research, we have about 100 scientists, if you will, clinician scientists. About 30% of those are active duty. And so for all our studies, we partner with military, and we bring in, clinicians, active clinicians who are seeing the ill effects.
So, I mean, you've just uncorked a whole bunch of stuff here, because, this is amazing. So, I mean, the fact that, we know, this focus on TBI, like that one big incident, is the same problem we have in contact sports, the focus on concussions, right?
Yeah.
Where we didn't look at those smaller hits, like we didn't look at the smaller impacts of repetitive blast exposure. Can you explain to our audience, what does, low-level blast exposure do to the brain over time? And what kind of occupations in the military are subject to this type of,
Sure. So any brain injury is caused usually from external forces, and that can be the contact sports, motor vehicle crashes, it can be all of those, but also the blast overpressure. So we know, like if you're firing a weapon, if you will, and so with that, there's a blast that comes out. And I always think of the brain as like a really thick gelatin structure. But as you know, you can feel the percussion, especially with some of those bigger artillery mortars, grenades, even shoulder-fired rockets. You feel that percussion. And so for a long time, we were very aware of the percussion to the eardrums or to the lungs with the blast overpressure. But it's only been more recently that we're really taking into account that blast also will reverberate the brain as that blast kind of goes through it. And so one of my scholars through the Center for Combat Research, his name is Corey McAvoy, and he was working with Dr. James Mayburn out of the VA in Seattle, as well as University of Washington. He was a 18 Delta, so Special Forces medic in the Army. He was getting his master's here at CU, so that qualified him to become a scholar. It's an unpaid position, but it's just somebody who's interested in military research. So he did one of the first low-level cumulative blast injuries studies, if you will. And so he took the NATO silhouette and put pressure gauges in them and looked at a blast room or breaching a room, right? And who in what one of those positions, how much force they got. And so what he found in just that, practice, if you will. I know most of your audience is military, so they understand all of that. But just we call it, the jelly rolls and the different blast explosions. We call them pretend, but they whack up, a lot of pressure. So he found in the course of one day of training, 27.1 PSI. And over the course of like some of our special operators, like SEALs or combat controllers or, Rangers, they can get up to 2,700 PSI within that training period. None of this was ever calculated in anybody's military medical history. It was not even considered. It was like, did you deploy? How many rounds did you fire? It would not even that. It's like,
Not even that. Nope.
no, none of that was even calculated. So now the DoD did come up with a list of MOSs and Air Force specialty codes. But if you think about it, and I know you know this data, but an average mortarman in the course of just training can, shoot off 1,000 rounds in a year. So, or 4 years, that's 4,000 rounds. And so that exceeds the 4 PSI, which is really, we need to study it better because that's an arbitrary number, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, it's like the OSHA number, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's what the OSHA.
right. And that has to do more with the ears and the lungs and the air-filled, organs in your body that have a response to that pressure. So we are just on I think, our infancy of learning more in this realm. And
No, I mean that, and so, in your opinion, why did it take? And this is, a question that all of us soldiers have, and whether we're parents of athletes, is like, why has it taken so long to understand that low-level blast exposure is an issue? I mean, we've been studying TBIs since 2000. Well, since 2003. The wars before, we didn't have IEDs. Really, these wars here, we've been, it's been game on, right? 9/11, so we've had, 2001 actually. So we've had, decades of combat experience, yet we've never considered, we've always looked at that big incident. Why haven't we focused on this? Why has it taken us so long as the military, not pointing fingers, but, why have we overlooked this?
well, I think you've talked about this before. You have to train like you fight, and I'm a firm believer in that. But I think there's a lot of ways to prevent and mitigate. It was really 2003. I was deployed to Iraq at the time, and that was my really first exposure to what a regular TBI was, not even noticing that. So it's only been 20 years. So if you think about cancer therapy or, some of the others, 20 years is not very long. But for us, it's 20 years that we've worn our uniform. And so that 20 years is our career, and that's huge. So I think there's a multitude of factors. One is we don't show the chink in our armor, right? So like when we got our bell rung, we didn't tell anybody. We hit it. I had 23 years of in flight status, right? And so like special operators, you don't want to be pulled from the mission. So you don't always divulge everything, right? Not thinking clearly. I have anger, irritability, and low frustration tolerance. That's why it's also often misdiagnosed, right? Because those are PTS symptoms and they're also TBI symptoms. And so typically the medical community would just say, oh yeah, well, with that job and what you've seen, yeah, that's PTS, and really not get into the weeds of it. And also, even as a medical provider, and I've taught trauma teaching for a long time, so medical providers, we really didn't even conceptualize that is a problem. Even thinking about, we teach with blast, you have your primary, secondary, tertiary, even quaternary, where the IED explodes and you get the pieces of the suicide bomber in you, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
those pieces. But it would make sense. Like if we're looking in the ears for a ruptured eardrum or tympanic membrane, if we're assessing the lungs, it would make sense, right? but it wasn't conceptualized. And I don't think it was intentional on anybody's part to correlate those things. But now we know enough that we have, I think we're just in a great place, right? The momentum, the people knowing about it, congressmen and people who want to move the bar, right? And they want to make a difference. I think we're at a great place right now to find the science and how to mitigate it, and then how to take care of our nation's heroes who have been exposed to these things.
And I think you're right. I mean, I do think the pendulum swung. And I think while we have critical momentum from key stakeholders, leaders, and entities like you, 90% of the country still is not aware that this is an issue. And that's the challenge right now. And I think what you're talking about here is the difference between, what I love to hear is, that you're researching and in 3 years you're publishing paper, because we talk about research for research's sake. Let's research this, and then, you know what, this needs to be further validated. So let's go get some more grant money and research it. And we don't turn it into action. Talk to us a little bit about the research that you've been part of, and when that has been, that has, turned into something that's actionable to help, treat our service members and first responders.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons that Dr. Vic Babarda, who is the founder of the Center for Combat Research, because as a commander, multiple commands, and a general officer, sometimes Congress would say, go do, right? Suicide prevention. We got to say we're doing something. But like, we don't know that it helps. We don't know if it hurts. We don't have the science. And sometimes, as you know, we just go do stuff, right? We're going to have this safety down day, or we're going to do whatever, but we don't know that it works. So I was very interested in doing science and doing research that's going to help. I always said our warriors and our warrior medics, because I have a special interest for warrior medics. And so that was the impetus for it. And so, like you said, is publishing the papers is important, because that's how you disseminate the information, and everybody can now have that same common language, and then you can repeat it across the world. But for me, changing clinical practice guidelines. So years ago, the Army would do their own research, the Air Force and the Navy, but really we need collective. That's why, to me, the partnership with academia, military, industry, really to get after the solutions, I think is really important. So one of the really good studies that we've done, and it's not specifically TBI, but it's oxygen. It's called Strategy to Avoid Excessive Oxygen. So Special Operations Command came to us and said, carrying oxygen downrange. And for me, as an air medical evacuation specialist, taking liquid oxygen in a 115-pound container that converts liquid to gaseous, the amount of money taking that on an aircraft, the amount of money to maintain that in a dusty downrange where it doesn't work. So civilian did not know. So nobody knows exactly the right amount of oxygen that our critically ill and injured patients need. We, EMS, throughout the military, EMS is emergency medical services. And through an emergency department, if somebody's critically ill or injured, we give them high flow, 100% O2. We just flow it through them. So SOCOM really wanted to know how much oxygen do they need, because if you think about a medic downrange, you could carrying oxygen in the tanks and all of that. And so we did a small study with that, and then we did a bigger one looking at, and this is Dr. Adit Gundy, who is the primary investigator, but 17,000 patients during COVID in the ICUs, 7 big hospitals, including the Brooke Army Medical Center, in the biggest military hospital, the level 1 trauma, all these patients. And what we found is too little oxygen is bad. Too much oxygen is actually bad. There's what's called normoxia between 90 and 96%. So meanwhile, the Army, Air Force, Navy, the people who get acquisitions, like, they were waiting for our study, because maybe we just need an oxygen concentrator instead of the big oxygen tank. So what we found is 95% of critical ill patients do not need that high flow O2. And this is, and we had a subset of TBI, we had a subset of burns to look at, and they all did better with that 90 to 96% of oxygen. So, and with that, they also decreased length of stay. So they spent less time in the hospital and they recovered better. So
Wow.
this was profound for the world because so long, everywhere, every ambulance, everything, every hospital, every country in the world gives everybody that high oxygen. And we found that that was not needed. So with that, we changed 12 clinical practice guidelines in like the TCCC and disseminated that. But how we did that is we brought the stakeholders in early. So we told them this is coming out. We went to the Military Health Systems Research Symposium. We collaborated with white stakeholders from each of the branches. So they knew it was coming. They were waiting for it. And then the industry then was waiting too, because maybe they can. So what they create for the medics for the next battle, for large scale combat operations might look differently based on that one study. So it typically takes 17 years from the time you have your idea for research to get it to the bedside. So that study was 17,000 critically ill and injured patients in ICUs across the United States was done in 3 years. So it's unheard of.
No, I mean that is, and that's what we need with, right now we're trying to change the pendulum on repetitive brain trauma so that we can get action. Because we'll talk about suicides here in a little bit, which is kind of unfortunately part of the focus of what we're talking about. But on the mental illness side, I mean, you said that a lot of the mental illness that we see that is attributed to PTSD could also be caused by low-level blast exposure, repetitive blast exposure. How do we, what tools are you doing to evaluate and make the determination that LLB or repetitive blast exposure could be having an impact on the mental illness that these soldiers suffered when they come to you?
Yeah, and it's hard to say. I think if you have a TBI and that alone, so a lot of times you have comorbidities, right? So if you have had a TBI and now your cognitive is affected, your speech language is affected, your executive functioning is affected, your balance, I always call it a life altering functional disability, right? Because
Mhm.
it can negatively affect every aspect of your life. It's still functional. Like if you look at me, you don't know I had a TBI, right? Most people, 99% of people wouldn't know until I stumble. And then people just, wave that off. And so it's not unusual to have that alone cause depression. Like why, this is, people always say, is this my new normal? And I don't like that term. I'm not there yet, right? Because I am on my path to recovery. I am on my path to, to total healing. It's just a process, right? And even though I can't do that yet, it's going to come, right? But part of it is if you were misdiagnosed in the first place and it was so that piece of the traumatic brain injury was missed, then you're never going to get the right therapies because talk therapy, CPT, CBT, EMDR, they're all great things, but they won't treat the traumatic brain injury. They'll work on the psychological health aspect, but you still need the cognitive therapy, the speech language that helps me with my executive functioning, helps me with my word finding or those other pieces. And the neural balance to have a neurophysical therapy, because the interesting thing with when the Rangers come, and we've had others, we have had SWICs and Navy SEALs and 10th and 20th Special Forces Group come here too, and they're fun because they're so competitive. So some of the neural testing
Nah,
is, I know, right? It's
not
like, what's
those
your number?
guys.
What's my number? I improved this by this much. I improved by this
Yeah.
much. And the funny thing is we have sophisticated machines that our neurophysical therapists use that can kind of, it's almost like, I think of it as like a brunking bronco, but you're standing on it, right? And so your body is reacting to all this movement. And as your body's reacting, our vision takes over, right? And so we learn to compensate. And so what happens with the people with TBIs, they've compensated, but they don't realize they're compensating. So we'll put these soldiers on there and they're doing great. And they're like, yeah, I'm crushing this. And then we'll say, okay, close your eyes. So they get rid of the visual compensation that they've been using and not even realizing they're using that visual compensation. And so they'll get that piece. And then we also do co-treatments. And so like they can walk, but they can't walk and talk at the same time, or walk and talk and do some cognitive functioning. And that's kind of an undersimplification, but when it gets to something that's really hard, it can make a big impact. And so we might have the neurophysical therapist challenging them physically, and then the cognitive specialists, our speech language pathologists, doing cognitive exercises. And so it challenges. And so most of the time with the TBI, we do avoidance, right? Because I get overstimulated. So somebody with a TBI will go into a restaurant. Instead of just being present and having a conversation with you, Bruce, they can hear the conversation at the next table. They hear the music being played. They hear that dish being dropped. And so somebody without a TBI can filter all of that out, and they can be present. And so with the TBI, their head is having to switch from all those things, and it causes cognitive fatigue. So they can be so exhausted just from that conversation. So they're really not enjoying it. And so that's why they'll avoid things like concerts or live music or going to the mall, or even going shopping can be an event because of all that overstimulation. So the team works to give you precision medicine, because every TBI, even if they're repetitive blast, even if you're Mortarman, you have the same MOS, everyone is different. And so every TBI requires precision targeted therapy by integrated team. Because typically what happens is you might be seeing a neurologist here and a speech there. They don't talk to each other, and they don't work collaboratively together to have you recover.
Well, and that's all great, but what I was looking for is like, are there any tools? Are you scanning the brain? Are you doing a G? I mean, I know that you're looking at their MOSs. That's great, but what else? Are there any other tools or technology you use to validate that? Look, your brain's been impacted. DTI scans, functional MRIs, QEEGs, and then a GBEV. Are you doing GBEV calculations at all? Generalized blast exposure variable calculations?
Or not, but I think like some of this needs to be standardized. I always say standardized, repeatable process that everybody kind of does it the same and has that same assessment.
Absolutely agree.
And
Yeah.
so we do have Dr. Jeff Hebert is our director of research here at the MIBH. And so he has several studies that's going on that he's doing currently. And they do involve a functional MRI. And one is like irritability, looking at that. And there's something great about having that correlation when you have those MRIs that you can say, yes, I can see this.
You can see it, right?
You can see it. But even without seeing it, so like after my TBI, right, I had the CAT scan, right? We do a CAT scan in the emergency department, not to say you have a TBI, but to rule out the bad things that require immediate intervention, like subdural hematoma or subarachnoid, or all those things that need to be fixed right now. So a structural integrity issue within the brain. And so everything else is fixed, and then you're kind of sent out. So I think there's a lot of modalities out there that we need to incorporate other than just the traditional. And I think the diagnostic, I think we need to be better at that and do more research in that area. But like you, I don't want to wait 17 years. I don't even want to wait 3 years. Some things, it makes sense, right? When they say anecdotal information, that might be a one patient, an N of one, right? Or it might be in my clinical experience as a, expert clinician, I've noticed this, so it's some of those that I think we need to share as best practices as well. So there's a lot of modalities out there. The problem is they're very expensive, right? So all of that in one location. And for me, one of the things is like, if you go to drug and alcohol, right? We will send you to rehab 12 times, right? But it's inpatient, it's expensive, but insurances, the VA will pay for it, but insurances will not pay for this type of modality. So I think, because I always like you think about how do you make it scalable? Great, we've seen 1,000 patients, which saves their lives and their families and helps the communities. But how do we make all of these modalities scalable to everybody, the 2.8 million Americans who suffer annually a TBI, and all the sports related and the militaries and the veterans. And so a lot of, to me, that opinion comes down, one, you have to have science that says it works, right? And um, so we are Marcus Institute for Brain Health is part of the Avalon Action Alliance. So there's
Oh, you far? Okay. I didn't know that. All right. Mike Hartman and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Mike's a close friend and works closely with. As a matter of fact, we just got funding from the state of Florida to run a brain supplementation and ketamine study on
I know
veterans.
Florida is progressive, and then that one of our partners there is a Haley Brain Wellness Center.
Yeah, they're awesome. Dr. Marissa over there, McCarthy. So, I mean, a lot of what you're talking about, General, is exactly what we need. I mean, there's a lot of modalities out there, and a lot of them are not expensive. When you start talking about psychedelics, you start talking, TMS, a lot of these machines that are out there, photobiomodulation, vagus nerve stimulation, all that. The issue is we can't get the VA or TRICARE to cover them. And that is, and when and so I guess let me pose this question to you: when we have a veteran that is thinking about taking their life, why does something have to be FDA approved when we have thousands of veterans that have been through each one of these modalities? And you can pick one, right? I mean, there's thousands of veterans that have been through HBOT, they've been through psychedelics, they've been through TMS, they've been through electronic, Dr. Mark Gordon's brain supplementation, stellate ganglion blocks, and over 80 to 90% of these veterans have said, this has helped me. And at what point do we say, look, we're not waiting for FDA. We are going to open up these modalities to these veterans. And yes, to your point, how do we make them scale? Are we going to come up with one therapeutic model? We can't, because as you said, every brain injury is different, right? We have no idea what combination of these modalities will work. What we do know is that these modalities, instead of therapy and instead of pharmaceutical interventions, can impact brain health, can keep people from taking their lives, can improve their mental health. So what's the problem? Why is somebody as advanced in both the term in terms of medical, support, research, and science saying, look, we need these modalities. What can we do to work with? I have legislation in Congress right now with Congressman Van Orden to cover, and I'd love to work with you on this list of modalities, to take all these modalities, and we don't care. The veteran's going to go, when they have mental health, problems where therapy and drugs cannot do it. And we all know that that's mistreatment of a, biologically caused or physiologically caused mental illness. How do we get over this block? I mean, this is the obstacle that's preventing, progressive organizations like yours of giving that next edge of care to these veterans that, could keep them,
Yeah, and it's complicated, but
It is, no doubt.
as I mentioned, and one of our partners is through the Avalon Action Alliance is Warrior's Heart, which you can go for drug and alcohol treatment, right? And so just to expand on that, we can send them 12 times, but for a TBI, so if you're getting that code, it's not reimbursed. It's not reimbursed. So this is a very expensive, very efficient, the model works. We have science that knows what model works, but it's very expensive. And so like if you're doing a co-treatment, so you have a speech language pathologist and you have a, doctorate of physical therapy working with you, we can't bill it for that. We can't bill for 32 hours. So I'm trying to even build a TRICARE for this program, but we don't even get 10 cents on the dollar. So what we need to do is so through the Avalon Action Alliance and our 6 TBI centers across the United States, we're doing a study that is being funded by philanthropic, so it can be faster, right? That shows here's the efficacy. And then we can go, that's what the legislators want. They want to know the science, right? And we know the typical medical science model you also have Big Pharma, who is funding a lot of those research studies. Some of the smaller research studies, like even the hallucinogenics, the psychedelics, started, and I think you probably know this, Bruce, but in 1970, Nixon stopped all research on psychedelics.
Right.
So really only for the last 2 years have we been able to have DOD. So now currently serving military members can participate in some of these studies. And so I believe there's a lot of efficacy in it and a lot of potential. So the CU in CU Denver, they just stood up a Center for Psychedelic Research, Dr. Jim Grigsby, and he met with us. So we had collaboration to look to see is there future collaborations that we can do, because previously nobody could even do it, right? And right now the biggest psychedelic conference is being held right here in Denver this week, looking at all,
That's right.
yeah, all
Yeah.
those modalities. And so even though you don't have the exact science, right? You don't have the medical model of randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study, there's been so much anecdotal, and there's been enough small studies that really showed great impact. And if you can do one treatment of ayahuasca or ibogaine, and that's equivalent to 10 years of therapy, wouldn't that make sense to do that? Because it can aid in neuroplasticity. But part of it is being able to think outside the box, being able to think, and nobody wants meds, right? Nobody wants a medication, plant-based medicine that is conducted with a ceremony and the ancient history of how to do it correctly, I think is different than somebody's basement doing psilocybin, right? I think there's a medically supervised.
I would agree with that. I would say there's different, there are, there should be approved, like even in ketamine. I mean, there are clinicians out there that should not be given this drug. There is a set setting for it. There is a proper way to administer the drug, and then to make sure that these veterans are doing the integration work afterwards to process a lot of what they've learned. But to your point, even what you're doing at the Marcus Institute might be considered expensive. But when you look at the alternative, which is a lifelong life of therapy and pharmaceutical drugs, pharma is all in this. Pharma is the last organization in this country that wants to see us fix this mental health problem, because they are making billions of dollars off it. And it's just wrong. I mean, we've had more kids die, as a result of pharmaceutical intervention on mental illness than looking at, especially when low-level blast exposure has been involved. Then I mean, we lose the equivalent of 20 years of war every year to suicide. And that our point is talking to folks like you, and we recognize that there are modalities out there that, yeah, they haven't done the gold standard of studies, but we've got, a suicide rate that, that is just, it's not dropping, and it's just not acceptable. Can we start looking at administering these therapies when we've had thousands of veterans say this has changed? I know they've impacted my life. They have absolutely impacted my life. And I was diagnosed with brain injuries and damage as a result of my 21 years. And you've had a TBI. And you understand the importance of this. But, it'd be nice to see, the military, take that next step, right? And to get that going. So speaking of next steps, where do you think we go from here? We're administering a model program. You're treating thousands of veterans. Let me ask you a quick question. I ask everybody this. So what percentage of veterans that go through your program say that they have had a positive impact on their mental health?
Right now it's 98%, but I know it's 100. Because I meet and I do group therapy with everybody that comes through here, and just watching them from the beginning to the end and the light, and how many parents and family members who I've said, you gave me back my child, you gave me back my husband. And it's a journey. And that's the thing about all these modalities. There's no quick fix with a TBI. It is a wellness practice. And so I think about whole, brain health optimization. And some of the things that are often left off or not even identified is things like nutrition, supplements. Like one of the things that Dr. Andy O for the 75th Ranger Regiment is doing, as soon as they get a concussion, instead of saying, go buy these $200 worth of supplements, we're issuing this soldier these, and we're pulling you out of play. So we're doing the nutrition piece with it too. We know that for me, also at the Marcus, we do registered dietitian. We have a PharmD that goes over all their meds, because, it's funny because in the elderly population, if you have 6 or more medications, it's considered polypharmacy, increases the risk factor for falls, all these other comorbidities, if you have 6 or more, most of the people, I look at the meds that they're on coming in, right? And there's so many of them, right? So looking at how do you optimize without the meds? And so for us, we also talk about nutritious eating, your gut microbiome. There's a brain gut axis. And so if you take care of your gut, so 90% of your serotonin, which is one of your feel-good hormones that helps with depression, anxiety, comes from produced in the gut. And so if you're eating crap and you're not taking care of your belly, also inflammation, if you look at how many autoimmune diseases are out there now, it's because we have poor nutrition. So we talk about how to heal the gut microbiome, and it's going to help with your brain health. So everything's connected. I have a vagal nerve stimulator. I use it a couple times a day, and that helps me, and it's not a med. But also I do transcendental meditation, 20 minutes twice a day. So there's no quick fix that's out there, and it is a journey, and it's a continuous journey. And so my favorite quote is, I want to die young as late as possible. So I am looking at
Sign me up for that one, man. I like that.
Looking at my health years. How can I take, and I heard on one of your podcasts, and I'm going to steal it from you, is that, we've taken good care of us physically, but I prioritize my brain health as much as I prioritize my physical health now. And that's doing all of those wellness practices. So I don't think just one modality, so that the integrated of all these disciplines, I think is really important. I think learning how to down regulate when you're here, right? So how do you do that parasympathetic dominance? So I think those are things that need to be learned too. So one HBOT, one psilocybin, one is not going to fix it. It really is changing your mindset of, I am in control of this, right? And I have the power to move me forward, but it's getting them out of I think the biggest thing is saying, yes, you have a TBI. And they say, what? I'm not crazy. It's not just in my head. It's not this.
Yep.
One is
Closure.
exactly diagnosing what the underlying piece is. And one of the big things you mentioned, Bruce, is for so long, you didn't have that one TBI. So it was all labeled as psychological health issues, mental health issues, and it had nothing to do with the job that you're doing. And so, yeah, I think we're at a great place, because I think, there's smart, talented people in all those areas that are moving the bar and figuring out how to take care of our nation's heroes. And I'm thrilled to be part of it.
Well, Dr. Flarity, you're moving the bar. Okay. You are part of this movement that's going to get there. And I honestly think that we're going to get there. I mean, the support for the legislation is moving. I'd like to work with you on that. Love to understand more about that. I will be in Denver for the entire month of August, because it gets very hot here in Florida. And my grandson's up there, so I gotta go say hi.
Yay for you.
Hey. And so I'd love to come in and check out the campus, check out the program, report on it, maybe do a podcast there or something. But, this has been amazing. And look, before we go, I always love to have our guests, talk about themselves, the programs, how people can find them. Maybe, how to diagnose, or how to, understand that somebody you love might be suffering, a military veteran might be suffering from mental illness through, drinking, whatever it is. Just say some words about, your program, yourself. How do people find you? If they have concerns, how can they, reach out? What should they be looking for?
Great. Thank you for that. So the Marcus Institute for Brain Health, follow us on LinkedIn, because we post our stories, we post the research we're doing, how we're moving the bar in big and small ways. And then also Avalon Action Alliance, one of our team members here actually does the intake for the whole system. And so if you reach out to them, and then also one of the things with Avalon Action Alliance, they also have Warrior Path, which I went to about 15 months ago in the Pacific Northwest. And it's post-traumatic growth. It talks about how do you turn struggle into strength. And so there's great programs within that and Boulder Crest. And so again, we're very complicated. Our brain is very complicated. So we need a multitude of things to help us get our best brain health optimization. So, and then for me, reach out to me, because I'm always interested in collaboration, because you can't do, success takes support, failure you do it alone. and we will not move the bar. We won't make a difference individually, but collectively, there's so much power. Reach out to me because I'm always excited about working together.
Well, General Flarity, we will definitely be reaching out. I think what you're doing is amazing. It's so important, and you understand, both the limitations and the possibilities of what we can do with what we know now to improve treatment for our veterans and help diagnose those that are suffering from low-level blast exposure. But to your point earlier, the 2.8 million people that have TBIs every year can also benefit from expanded access to these programs instead of a lifetime of medication and therapy that doesn't help them, because they too suffer. It might be just one big event, but they suffer the same outcomes, the same poor outcomes, and the same poor treatment through misdiagnosis and mistreatment of their maladies. So thank you so much for what you're
Absolutely.
doing. Thank you for coming on the show, and I will be out there to say hi, and you can count on that. Really appreciate it.
So thrilled. Yes. Thank you so much, Bruce. Bruce, it's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, another great episode of Broken Brains. Don't remember, go get your free book. It's on the website, the only book for parents in the country. And I'm actually rewriting this thing to bring another 3 years of information to it. So go in there, get it. Don't forget about our app, Head Smart, on the Google Store. Also has the book, but also has probably the most comprehensive list of concussion and repetitive head impact information for your parents out there on the net. Don't remember, and don't forget our second summit on repetitive brain trauma will be held here in Tampa, September 3rd and 4th. Shouts out to all of you that are paying attention. Thank you for the reviews. Don't forget to like us, pass us on to everybody else, post whatever you can on what we're doing out there. As General Flarity said, this is so important, and the time is now to address not only this for our veterans, but also for our kids as well. And a big shout out to our producer, Denny Caballero, Security Halt Media. You ever looking for somebody that knows about marketing, always reach out to him. Till next time, thank you so much for listening to another podcast. We'll see you soon on Broken Brains. Remember, you only got one melon. Take care of it. We'll talk to you later.
So true.